I will now call to order a Town of St. Andrews Special Council meeting on Monday, March 15th, 2021 at 6 p.m. Recording of attendance, I note that all members of council are in attendance with, I think, the exception of Councillor Gumichaud.
Correct.
And hopefully he will be able to join us. I'll look for a motion to approve the agenda as written, please.
Your worship?
Yes.
If I could make a minor request, if we could move item number 5 on the agenda to number 1, because that item is referenced in the zoning bylaw, I think it would help the discussion.
Moving item number 5 on the agenda.
Yes, the short-term rental bylaw.
You want it to be E1, not
Or
D1.
I guess if you put it as item number 0, so that we can discuss it before we discuss the zoning bylaw, because it is referenced in that bylaw.
You can do it as E1A,
Mr.
E1B.
E1, yeah, or E1 or E0, whatever the case may be.
Well,
Never had
we'll
it.
know it'll be the first thing, so it's okay, Your Worship. So there's a motion on the floor by Councillor Grew to move number 5 to the first item under section E.
All right. It's fine. Any objections to that? If not, I'll approve that. Thank you, Councillor Grew.
Thank you, council.
All right. Now a motion to approve the agenda as amended, I suppose. Although that's a friendly amendment to move it from one place to the other, it's not changed in any material way.
So does that mean that all the other items will just go down a number?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Just checking. Thank you.
Okay, all in favor of approving the agenda?
Your worship, you need a mover and a seconder.
Yeah, can I have a mover for that, please?
Also
Councillor
move.
Grew, and Councillor Bishop can second it. Thank you. All in favor of the amended agenda, please signify by saying the amendment to the agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And now we'll go back and have a motion to approve the amended agenda.
I'll also move.
Thank you, Councillor Bishop, and the seconder.
Councilor Grew.
Councillor Grew, thank you. And all in favor of approving the amended agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Council. We will now move to disclosure of conflict of interest with respect to any matter.
Your worship, to let you know, Councilor Gumichaud has arrived.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, Councillor Michelle. All right, hearing none, we will move on. We also have with us this evening Chief Administrative Officer and Treasurer Chris Spear, and our Clerk and Senior Administrator Paul Knopper, along with Xander Gopan, our planner from the Southwest New Brunswick Service Commission. And I will now move to D, presentations, and I will turn it over to Mr. Gopan to give us a presentation in relation to the bylaw amendment to the municipal plan.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, members of council. So I'm going to jump right in to my presentation here on municipal plan bylaw MP 20-03. And this presentation is a public presentation. The Community Planning Act requires a public presentation as part of any municipal plan amendment. So this is that public presentation. It shouldn't take too long. So this is in regards to 108 Sophia Street, which has been a medical clinic for over 50 years. And in 2009, the property transferred to the town from the original owners or the current owners. the new wellness center is now open or just about to open. So there's no longer a need for the medical clinic at 108 Sophia. And the town put the property on the market for sale and has entered into a conditional agreement with Doctors Tammy Matheson and Krista McAllister, who are veterinarians and owners of the Mayfield Veterinary Clinic in St. Stephen. Their intent is to open a vet clinic in St. Andrews on the site, and so they've applied to rezone it to the mixed use zone. It's currently in the service residential zone, and the use as a medical clinic has been legally non-conforming probably for quite some time. But in order for a new commercial use, it needs to be rezoned. And in addition to being rezoned, it also needs to be designated as commercial on the municipal plan generalized future land use map. It's currently designated as residential. And so that's really what the municipal plan amendment is about, is changing that designation, and then the rezoning will follow that. So that's the property there. It's that sort of L-shaped property in the plat. And here's your aerial shot of the property. They have parking there, and there's also parking just across the street as well. And here's the from the front of the building. So looking at the municipal plan policies to see if this change meets the intent of the municipal plan, there's a few that do support it. So council shall seek to provide an economic climate conducive to investment and the growth of year-round employment opportunities while protecting and enhancing the quality of life in St. Andrews. So this development, the vet clinic, would obviously be year-round, and it would provide employment for several individuals year-round, as well as enhancing the quality of life for pet owners in town. And there's also an institutional policy that council shall acknowledge that residents' wellness, healthcare, facilities, and services are an important element of the community and a significant factor in attracting and retaining residents. And while they're not exactly the same, I think it's fair to say that for pet owners, their animals' healths are very important to their own health, and having unhealthy animals is certainly a source of human distress. So I think having wellness centers for all members of the community, being animals as well as humans, is still meeting this policy. So a vet clinic in many ways is very similar to a medical clinic in terms of how people are using it. You have people driving, coming for an appointment, staying for a few hours and leaving, and the medical clinic has operated for over 50 years without incident. So it is an established commercial, even if it's not a legally conforming commercial use, it is an established commercial use in the residential neighborhood. The one difference is that animals may be kept overnight. I assume that's part of the plans for the clinic, but there would be a condition that kennels must be kept inside, and the town does have a noise bylaw. So if there were considerable issues with animal noise, then it could be enforced under that bylaw. The closest vets currently are in St. Stephen and St. George. So anybody in St. Andrews with pets, which I think a considerable number of people in town are driving to St. Stephen or St. George when they need appointments for their pets. So this is providing a service for existing pet owners. But I think almost more importantly, it's going to help to attract future pet owners. And both of those municipal plan policies referred to growth in the town. And it's certainly a competitive advantage when people are looking for places to move. If you have a vet clinic in town, that's a really good thing for pet owners. And in addition, if you think of not just directly in town, but on the peninsula and places that maybe currently they're driving to St. Stephen or St. George, well, maybe now they're going to drive to St. Andrews. They're going to leave their pets there. They're going to shop in town. So there could be other economic benefits as well. The property is in the town plat and it does have some heritage features. So through the rezoning process, council can set conditions related to those, and I've recommended those in my report. We're not at the rezoning stage yet, but I just want council and the public to know that this is taken into consideration for this property. That's all for me. And I do believe, and I'll let Mr. Knopper run or the mayor decide how to proceed with the meeting, but I believe Dr. Krista McAllister is here as well. So they might wish to speak a little bit about their plans, and I think they would be available to answer questions as well. But I'm also available for that.
Thank you, Mr. Gopin. Dr. McAllister, if you're listening in and you wish to say anything, please do. And if you would be kind enough to be available for any questions from council.
Actually, we have Dr. Matheson and Dr. McAllister.
Okay,
both.
great,
Yeah,
great.
yeah, we team
Welcome,
up.
both of you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I just wanted to make a correction that I'm no longer the owner of Mayfield Vet Clinic since 2014. So this is a separate entity, but we will collaborate with Mayfield as well. So
Okay,
that's our consideration.
okay, great. Thank you.
And I mean, we've both been in the area for a number of years. We have experience in running and owning vet clinics before. This is not our first kick at the can. So we're very aware of how it should be run. With respect to the noise, any kennels and pets being kept inside will be in a soundproof room. Generally, we don't hospitalize a lot overnight now. We tend to refer any critical care cases to Riverview, but there are occasions that there are pets overnight. But generally, those animals are ill, so not
Hopefully
making
not.
a lot of noise.
And there was just a question too about the parking across the street, because I think that's now become a different piece of property for sale from the town of St. Andrews. Is that correct? Yeah.
That's correct.
Not included
But
in
there
that.
are a number of parking spots as part of the property that we're discussing that you've.
Yes, and that seemed to be quite.
entered in a contract to buy. Yeah, that
Yes.
should be sufficient because for the most part, it's in and out traffic, I would assume, like
That's
people
right.
coming for their appointments, having
Yeah,
their pets
exactly.
dealt with and leaving, you
Yeah.
know? Much like the medical clinic was.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they're just have
Okay,
to bring
thank
their
you.
owners with them.
Yeah, that's right. Council, does anyone have any questions for the doctors? Or for Mr. Gopin?
Just through you, your worship, obviously, we are going to set a hearing of objections likely later in this call. So for
Right.
myself, I look forward to hearing from the public, but initial reaction to it is it's a wonderful addition to our community. There's a lot of people in our community that don't like to have to travel outside of the community with their pet in order to get it looked after. And if you look at repurposing the building from what it was to what it can be with you, it makes complete sense, actually. If you look at the traffic flow, really, at the end of the day, it's a health service.
Yeah.
I would say thank you for investing in our community, and we will hear from the public because they have. I look forward to hearing from them and hopefully welcoming you to as new
Great.
business
We're
in town.
looking forward to it as well.
Great, great. Anyone else? Good. Well, thank you very much. And again, my appreciation for your being here
No
this evening
problem.
to speak to
So
council.
do you want us to just go on mute and hang out here for a while, or?
Sure, you
Yeah.
can do, yeah,
Okay.
certainly. You're welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Gopin. I think that wraps that part of it up for now. And now we'll move to, as we agreed, to number 5, which is now number 1.
Oh, PED 200901. I think this is the right one. Bylaw 21-01, a bylaw respecting short-term rental properties in the town of St. Andrews, second reading. And the background is the town of St. Andrews has been developing a new bylaw to help regulate short-term rental properties in the community. The following is a timeline of the process. We had workshops in September, October, November of 2020. We had a first reading Jan 18th of 2021 and a public consultation session February 8th of 2021. And from the feedback provided by council and the public, staff have developed a new version of the bylaw. Council needs to discuss if another public consultation is wanted or move forward with the bylaw as presented. So the motion is that council grants leave for second reading of bylaw 21-01, a bylaw respecting short-term rental properties in the town of St. Andrews.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Could I have a seconder for that motion, please? Councillor Groove, thank you. Comments, council? Discussion.
I have a few questions if I could.
Certainly, Councillor Harrison.
And there's about 4, I think, but the first one, and this may be a simple one, it refers to if you have more than one unit that you're managing or you own and you're renting, you then are subject to the commercial permit process. Is that, as I read this document, is that only at this point a process that deals with the cost of getting the additional permits? Or is there an actual process above and beyond additional costs that's involved?
Either Mr. Gopin or Mr. Knopper, could you respond to that for Councillor Harrison?
Yes, Your Worship, I'll respond to that. So through you, Your Worship, in regards to this, so the permit process is for the standard operation of requesting the permit. So that's the pricing. There can be subsequent additional permit costs depending if there is a need for a development permit or not. And I know Mr. Gopin can speak a little bit more to that, but basically within the process, they would put in their application and to pay their fee for their permit, and then it would go subsequently through the process of evaluating if it's compliance within the zoning bylaw or not. And if the property is not within compliance with the zoning bylaw, then further development permit would need to be attained for it to meet zoning regulations. So there could be an additional step within the permitting process. And more specifically, there is another level within the permitting process, especially if you have a property with more than 6 sleeping units. That's where you need an additional step to have a fire marshal inspection done under the Fire Prevention Act. So there's a couple of extra steps that, depending on what the property is and what the review process is, that's what would need to take place. Mr. Gopin, can you speak to the development permits?
Yeah, sure. So development permits are for new uses and changes of use. So for any new short-term rental, any existing use that's changing to a short-term rental in a zone that it's allowed, then it's a pretty simple matter of obtaining a development permit. There may be cases where it's an existing use and it's legally, it has been conforming, maybe it's a tourist home, so the development permit isn't needed. Still need to get the short-term rental license. And then there may be cases where the use isn't even allowed in the zone. So in that case, the applicant would be looking at a rezoning, and depending on, it's rezonings are always very context specific. So there may be cases where it's recommended, there may be cases where it's not recommended, but that's sort of where we would be involved in that process, is development permit and possible rezonings.
Okay. Question number 2, and more of a comment, this one under 4.1.2, that you're supposed to include an image of the permit or a link to it when you advertise. I mean, I'm just not sure what that would look like or what the utility is. I get you'd have it in the house itself, but if you have it up on the web, I don't know. Like I'm not sure how that would work. If you just have to take a picture and it would be right beside the picture of the bedroom would be a picture of the permit. But I'm just not sure what role that plays, to be honest. And
Through your worship, I can just respond to that.
Yeah.
So by putting through your worship, by putting a permit or your permit number, a picture of it on for instance, Airbnb, then you are then telling the public that you are permitted under the town of St. Andrews with the permit number. And basically it's advertising saying that, you know, you're an allowed use within the community. And this is a very similar process that is used in many of the bylaws across Canada and North America for issuance of when you're advertising your property, is to either list a picture of the permit with your ad or list your permit number.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt.
And then
Councillor
5
Harrison.
point, what's that?
Sorry to interrupt, just because you were on that one, if you don't mind. So we want them to properly put in the description, put the permit number, and then also have an image or link to the permit number. Isn't both kind of redundant? Like, wouldn't you see the permit number in 4.12, like versus do two things to prove that you have it? Because like in reality, even 4.11, if the town wanted to know, they could look up the permit number and match the address versus there's so much information to have a link of it. I'm just questioning both of them versus one of them.
Through you, your worship, we can modify from one or the other. It was just, this was part of this version of the draft, so it can still be modified and we can pick one or the other.
Your worship,
Yes, Councillor Groot.
I would suggest that we delete para 4.1.2. For some reason, I got music playing. There we go, got rid of it. I would suggest, given the comments from Councillor Harrison and Deputy Mayor, that we possibly could delete para 4.1.2 without significantly impacting the bylaw.
Is it not the case, I'll just make a comment through with Mr. Knopper, was it not the case that this was partly motivated by having booking platforms know, or having owners and operators knowing of short-term rentals, knowing that they have to tell their booking platform that they have a permit, so that customers know that the place that they're coming to is actually an authorized place in our community to be. Hey, as long as that accomplishes that, that's okay.
Through you, your worship,
Oh, sorry.
yeah, through your worship, the change of 4.1.2 would accomplish that.
Okay, that's fine. We're not diluting that part of it. Okay, good.
If I may blaze on here, the next one, 5.1.1. What are, like, is there a best practices for fire safety document we can hand out and rely on? So that's an actual thing that we can give people and help them out, kind of thing.
Through you, your worship, the fire marshal's office does have a series of documents that do best practices for fire safety, which can be provided with that, and they are currently available on the fire marshal's website.
Perfect. And
just to be clear though, Councillor, it actually applies to residences is what those are, not specifically short-term rentals where these are owner occupied. So that'd be the guidelines that they'd be under. Under best practices for fire safety.
I mean, that may be something we want to look at in terms of narrowing it down to what exactly we're asking them to follow. And because then, especially for people that are visiting here, what they're relying on our service providers are following as well.
If I may, Your Worship.
Yes.
Just sorry, just because we're on that, Councillor, I don't mean to interrupt, but we actually had a discussion with the fire marshal's office about this. And the truth is, there's a fire code that is kind of like the building code that dictates all of this. And so it's not that we can't go over and above that is the problem. And so it's more or less related to the number of occupants and rooms than it is to the use of them. And so that's what I say, is that most of these smaller units will just follow the same type of best practices homeowners would, which essentially is fire alarms and CO2 detectors where needed.
Okay. And I just got two more quick ones. One is again more of a comment. I don't know how we work it in at this point, but 6.3 deals with parking, having at least one parking spot per I guess per sleeping room in the building. The only thing I fear sometimes is that we're gonna have people paving their lawns if there's like 4 available rooms, when typically 90% of the time they only have 2 cars that are visiting. I'd rather have 1 car sit in the street than have a bunch of lawns that get paved over or kind of turn into driveways and so it doesn't look residential anymore. And that's just kind of one comment there. And then I guess
Your worship, can we just touch on that comment from Councillor Harrison?
Mr. Hopper?
Yeah.
Your worship, through you, this actually relates back to the zoning bylaw and meeting the requirements of the zoning bylaw. Perhaps Mr. Gopin can speak to that, which is when it comes to the plant parking.
Yep. So there is a requirement in the zoning bylaw that there be 1 parking spot per unit. Putting this in the bylaw itself means that no one will be grandfathered into those parking requirements. Where the zoning bylaw, if it was only there, they could be grandfathered in. So I think that's why you would have them in both places. And to Councillor Harrison's point about what might happen to kind of the urban design, there are a number of provisions in the zoning bylaw about where parking spaces and parking lots can and can't go and how much of lots they can take up. So I think there is some protection around that already built into the zoning bylaw. And it might just be possible that it may be the reason why someone cannot have a short-term rental if they can't meet the requirements of the zoning bylaw when it comes to parking, or the short-term rental bylaw when it comes to parking if they don't have enough space.
Right. And then I guess my only other question that when I was reading through it, who can complain? I see we have a complaint process. I mean, I assume the first I read it, I thought it would just be the people staying there. But I guess, is it broader than that? Can like the general public make a complaint? And the other question, I guess, is it only on issues that would contravene this bylaw? Or is a noise complaint considered a complaint under this? Or if you get 3 within a year, like what kind of, what complaints are dealt with in this section, the 7.0 section?
Through you, your worship. So within this, it's not just complaints. Basically, it is a general complaints appeals process. We have them very similar within many of our bylaws, but preferably it would be, as part of this, it is like the good neighbor practice that you inform your neighbors that if there is any issues that they can provide the complaints directly to the occupant, but it still gives, or the owner, but it still gives the public an opportunity if they have a complaint, whether it's about the short-term rental or the noise or any of our other bylaws associated. So it could be open fires, anything within those contexts. Our bylaw enforcement officer would still investigate, just like in any of his current business dealings. Most of the time, we will look at what the complaint is and assess accordingly and review. If it is a severe enough issue that comes up, then we will proceed further down the line. But our goal is to educate and support and enforce as necessary.
Okay, you might want to check the language of the bylaw, though, is 3 violations of this bylaw. So I don't know if we want that.
Your worship?
Councillor Groot?
Thank you. More to Councillor Harrison's point, I think the bylaw in para 6.2 has sort of a catch-all that the operator shall ensure that they comply with all the bylaws of the town. So when you say this bylaw, it references all the bylaws of the town. So it pretty well covers everything.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Grew. I agree, the enforcement might be under several different bylaws. It could be a noise complaint, it could be something else, right? That's, and 3 strikes and you're out, eh?
Your worship, Deputy Mayor Henderson.
Deputy Mayor Henderson, sorry, missed you.
Yeah, so it was like Councillor Harrison was had my package of the ones I circled to ask questions about. So a lot of it was answered. I just wanted to just circle back. I guess before I circle back, I just wanted to say, I assume Mr. Nopper, you were the one with Mr. Gopin that developed this. Is that safe to say?
Your worship, it was actually a team effort between staff, council, and the feedback from the public.
I just want to say that although we're still working on it, I think you did a great job of incorporating some of council's concerns and feedback and blending it together. So thank you for doing that. So just going back to 6.3, which is the one about parking spaces. I just wanted to get some clarification, and I won't say a particular address, but I'll give a specific example in town. There is a short-term rental close to the Ross Museum that has a historic hedge, and I believe it's a 6, maybe an 8-unit house, a 6-bedroom house. I think they have about 3 parking spots, but in order to accommodate this, they would probably have to Councillor Harrison's point, cut that hedge down and just extend the parking lot in order to continue to operate, or only rent out 3 of the rooms in the entire house, even though it's used on purpose. So I guess just for clarity, are we saying that they'll either have to cut down the hedge or only rent 3 bedrooms moving forward in order to be approved? And even if they do rent 3 bedrooms, it's a 6-bedroom house. So I don't know how we would, I just have some concerns over that. That seems like again, I want appropriate parking. I don't want people that are neighbors having cars in front of their house the entire summer coming and going. But in the same sense, I want to make sure that if we're making a significant change, that we're looking at the effects that it has on people that own property in the town of St. Andrews.
I might comment on that quickly, Deputy Mayor. I think what that means is that in the process of when you sign up for a permit to run in the new world of our short-term bylaw, that'll all have to be negotiated between the town and the individual operators on whether or not anybody's going to get a pass. And it seems that our zoning bylaw would tell us that we ought not to be giving passes on providing enough off-street parking for your clients if you want to rent out 6 bedrooms. Again, that's something that's open to discussion.
Your worship, if I may.
Yeah.
I think maybe staff will have to go back and rethink it a little bit. The reason I'm saying is some of these places too, you might have one car with 2 or 3 couples coming, or a family. So they might have 4 sleeping units, but only have 1 minivan to fill those 4 units. I'm wondering if there's a way that we can say that the maximum parking can be related to the number of units, because especially during the summer, there is alternative parking throughout town that they could arrange. So for instance, worst case scenario, somebody could park at the arena and somebody else could go pick them up and bring them down to the unit downtown, and so, which, in St. Andrews seems a little extreme, but the flip side, if you go to larger city vacations, you walk for miles to get between your parking spot and your car. So my concern is that, like everybody else, is that you're either going to be transforming having cars parked on the lawn. There is some prevention of that because the zoning bylaw does prohibit in any type of residential zone how much parking you can have or what the driveway can look at. But we've got to find something in between that can work for a case-by-case basis. So without rewriting the zoning bylaw, of course, so we'll have to go and see what we can do before the 3rd reading and reconcile the 2.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Just not saying no, I'm not 100% sure the impacts that'll be on people that already own property and have limited space. And then the only thing I would say is I'm not myself 100% sure on the fee structure and the fact that somebody could still own 10 short-term rentals in the town of St. Andrews, because we did hear someone speak during the hearing of objections that alluded to the fact that they make about $30,000 off a short-term rental. Well, even though we upped the fourth, the permit fee for the fourth short-term rental in town, the reality is it still would be very profitable. A lot of places could pay that off, in bigger places in one night or two nights. So I'm just wondering if we need to limit that further than what the fee structure is doing, if it'll really deter it from happening. That's just my only other comment as we go through this the first time, but great job of moving it in a direction closer to where we needed to get.
Your worship.
Councillor Groom.
Thank you, your worship. Just a couple of points that have been raised is the first one is on para 6.3. And I just want to echo what the clerk had to say is para 6.3 more or less mirrors what's in the zoning bylaw. So unless we're going to change the zoning bylaw, this is essentially the same type of language. So we have to be consistent between our bylaws. The other issue, and it's more to what the deputy mayor just said, is looking at this particular bylaw, para 3.6 says that permits may be renewed on an annual basis. The town of St. Andrews reserves the right to limit the number of short-term rental permits and or restrict the number of short-term rental permits granted to a single applicant or business. So I think we have the protection in place there, and it's going to be a judgment call from the clerk or the town at the time when someone applies for a permit. So if someone comes in and applies for 20 permits, the clerk has the flexibility with this bylaw to say, sorry, we're restricting the number of permits to a single business. So he has that ability. So it gives the town staff the flexibility to make those judgment calls with this bylaw the way it is.
And of course, the motivation for that section is to keep as many long-term residences in play within the town, so that we don't end up with a whole town full of short-term rentals and no places for permanent residential growth and for that matter, for long-term rental space to exist. So we have to kind of have some sort of a balance. So I agree with you. I think that covers us.
But if I may, through you, your worship, I'm just wondering if we don't need a policy or state in the bylaw just to make sure that, like, if I'm staff, I don't know what that means. Like, it's a judgment call myself, maybe, if that's what we want to do. But is that 6? Is that 7? Is that depending, whatever factor is? Like, it's just, it's such a broad statement that I don't think it gives any direction. Because if I get the permit, I can see that I can have 4, I can have 5. Like, that's based on the permit. If I'm willing to pay the fee, unless staff tells me otherwise, it's just not. I don't know. Normally, you would say up to a limit versus whatever staff decide. And no disrespect to staff, I just wouldn't want that in case council's direction is different.
I think it's a case where we don't have all the data right now, and it's a moving target. So you can't really put a number to it right now. But I would suspect that in the future, if staff was going to limit the numbers, they would come back to council and say, we're looking at this number, and here's the data why we're saying this. And it gives staff that flexibility, because right now we threw out a number of 50, and I think a lot of people said, why 50? Why not 60? Why not 40? And I don't think you have that data right now to put a hard number on it, but this gives some flexibility to council and to staff of the future to say, okay, we reserve the right to limit it, but we're going to need some hard data to back it up in the future.
Back to the deputy mayor's comments.
Sorry, Mr. Spear, you have.
Sorry, your worship, if I could just, yeah, just back to the deputy mayor's comments, though. It is, I guess, what is the hard data going to tell us? And I understand what the Councillor Crew is trying to say, but if we have someone who comes in next year, buys 5 properties to do this and moves along like that, then if they set the highest rate to allow in the future, are we going to take those away? Staff have to make judgment calls, especially on a bylaw. It's better to have something as a fixed number, something that's reasonable. We could tell you what the maximum number is right now, for instance, and say, that's the maximum number based on the short-term or the accommodation levy that we saw last year. I just think if we set the limit now, then we won't have any whoopsie doozies where we gotta take permits away from people potentially in the future, or raise 2 or 3 people to that level of the first person who reaches that upper limit.
Anyone else want to comment? Because I tend to feel that too. And the other issue is we still have people who are buying properties and creating short-term rentals. And we need to be able to communicate our policy to prospective landowners who wish to come here and buy properties. You wouldn't want people to be coming in and after buying a property and us deciding that they can't qualify to be a short-term provider in our community under our bylaws. So they need to know what the bylaws are, but I've seen lots of cases where people didn't know what the bylaws were and figured they'd just get them changed when they got here. And so we don't want that to happen either. So I prefer to have a number. And if the number gets changed when we get more data down the road and it goes up or down, that's great too. But I think we should have a specific number that says no one can own more than this many separate premises that offer short-term rentals. And then we'll debate what that number is, because I think it puts staff in a difficult position as well.
Mayor, I agree. If you don't mind me speaking, I agree with that there should be a certain number because you need the guidelines for staff to know and for people, if they're coming in here to start a business like that, they need to know, that they can go ahead and do it. So we need a number.
Now, when we think about this number, I'm assuming if you bought, because we have some rather large homes in this town, and if you bought one of those and carved it into multiple individual units, I assume those would not each be a separate permit if they were all under the same property, or would they? Like, could you hit all of your permits on one piece of land? Would be, I guess, kind of one question.
Mr. Knopper?
I can address that. So the way the bylaw is written now, it is per property. So if somebody were to have one property and they were to have multiple units within that property, it would still be one permit for one property. Any additional properties would be subject to the additional permit costs.
The only other thing to think about when you do this, and I don't really have the language at the tip of my tongue, but if you have one person that just incorporates 10 different corporate shells, they could own 10, all of a sudden you have, each is owned by a separate legal entity technically. So I don't know if you want to try to find a way where you make related companies related, or if that's just getting too complicated. But there's always a way around it, and hopefully we can. I guess maybe we'll have to play catch up. But hopefully we'll get this popular that this is a problem.
Good point, Councilor Harrison.
The planner had his hand raised at one time, Your Worship.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Spear, and thank you, Worship. Just on the number, with the discussion floating around with the long-term rental stock, just keep in mind that your long-term rental stock is not only affected by the short-term rental market, it also will be affected by people building new long-term rental units. So when you think of a number, I wouldn't try and guess what that number is to protect the long-term stock, because ideally you're going to have developers building more long-term stock. I would really come at it more from what's a best practice for not leading to the commercialization of residential areas. That would be my concern there.
Yeah, I concur. And again, I've become quite concerned when I've looked at some of the best practices that we've been provided with, that the big issue for us is right now we are in a real estate boom. We have a lot of people who want to move here and just live here, it would appear, over the last year. And if those residential properties get commercialized as short-term rentals, they go out of the long-term residence market, which is equally of concern to me, because it's quite obvious that we're not getting that many people looking to buy our town lots in the subdivision. Everybody wants to buy the same house in the town plat. That's the way the market is right now, and that's also where the short-term accommodation providers will want to have their short-term rentals, their Airbnbs, et cetera, et cetera. So we have to figure out that. That's the critical point, is what happens in the town plat.
If we could also, I guess, circle back to the background of that motion, I guess we have to decide, do we want more public consultation? Or do we want to go ahead and do a second reading? I think that's what that was.
Yep.
That option was there somewhere. And obviously this is quite a change, I believe, from the last version we had in the public.
Your worship,
Yes,
I think we've had all the public consultation we need. We've received dozens and dozens of emails. We know where the public stands on this. I think staff have worked very hard and diligently to take into account the public input, and I think they've done a good job. I think we're ready to move this to second reading now, because we're running, quite frankly, we're running out of time, and we need to have something in place. Because if we don't, there's nothing to control short-term rentals within the town of St. Andrews.
we're also looking at, this is second reading, not third reading, and there still is some potential to, based on council's comments, some potential to make some of those revisions that were discussed and raised this evening. Staff can be sent to do that before third reading.
Your worship, if I may.
Council, does it? Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So yeah, I think we could have the best of both worlds. I don't think having consultation really slows the process. I don't think we need a second hearing of objections, but what we need to do is release this document to the public after second reading and encourage anyone that still has concerns to email us like they did last time. Almost everybody that spoke last time also sent us written communication as well. So I think we can get a spirit of where, and I think overall, I think a lot of people that had concerns after the first reading are going to look at this one and feel a lot better. But again, we'll hear from the public. So I think that we should release it, but also we've seen it, but I not only it takes some time, but maybe before the next meeting, if we could even have a 10-minute presentation that highlights the changes or something like that. I think just for just visibility to this bylaw would be good to do, but I don't think we need to stop it. I think we just need to do it in its normal process, but be open about it.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Anybody else have a comment?
Your worship, Councillor Gummichel here. I would
Councillor
tend to agree with the deputy mayor on not necessarily on having some way for the public to give more input. I think that's more input's always a good thing. And just a question for staff. I'm just wondering, ballpark, how much time do you think it's going to take both staff at town hall and the bylaw enforcement officer to carry out the inspections and for all the issuance of permits? Like, what kind of a time commitment would this be in the run of a week or a month? Just a guess would be good. Thank you.
Well, probably with a reduction in the number of types of inspections that we had originally talked about, we're probably talking an hour for each property in total, is what I'm saying. Maybe another half hour, 45 minutes for administration follow-up. And that's for the year per property, and that's probably on the high side. I think the clerk can add on to that if he disagrees, but.
No, through your worship, that's correct. It should take approximately that amount of time. And once 1 year is through, a renewal process will take relatively no time at all, because unless there's significant change from a renewal to a renewal, we'll just be able to issue a permit on a renewal basis, very similar to what we're doing with the tourism accommodation.
Thank you for answering that. Just wanted to confirm, because that's a big change from the first iteration of the bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gummichel. All right, Council, any more comments? We have a motion on the table. Go to second, knowing that there will be some minor adjustments. I think that the the notion that we will then, after second reading, be able to put this on our website and therefore have access and invite input from anyone who wishes to have input is certainly something we can do and should do. And but we don't need any more extensive public consultation than that, I don't believe. And so it should not slow down the process. And we'll wait to see what people have to say in terms of going to third reading. So call the question. If everyone's ready, all in favor of the motion to go to second reading, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, we will go to second reading. And so I will now read the bylaw for the second time by title. This is bylaw number 21-01, a bylaw respecting short-term rental properties in the town of St. Andrews. Be it enacted by the Council of the Town of St. Andrews under the authority vested in it by the Local Governments Act and amendments thereto, hereby makes and enacts this bylaw as follows. 1.0 Introduction. 2. Definitions. 3. Permits. For advertisement. 5. Instructions. 6. Regulations. 7. Complaints/appeals. 8. Enforcement. 9. Offenses. Effective date. We also have Schedule A, short-term residential units, fees and administrative penalties. And so this is read for the second time on the 15th day of March, 2021. Thank you. Number one, which is now number 2. PED 2050, zoning bylaw Z 21-01.
Okay, the background. We're here. Town of St. Andrews, after a lengthy consultation and debate period, can complete the third and final reading of the zoning bylaw, Z 21-01, and the following is the timeline of the process we've taken thus far. First reading was August 17th, 2020. We had a public information session September 8th, 2020. We had workshops for council September 21st, 2020, November 4th, 2020, November 25th, 2020. We called for views of PRAC and a public hearing of objections Jan 18th, 2021. Public hearing of objections Feb 8th, 2021, and a second reading March 1st, 2021. So the motion is that council grants leave for third and final reading of the zoning bylaws Z 21-01 for the town of St. Andrews.
Thank you. Could I have a seconder for that motion, please?
I'll second it.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Bishop. Comments, council?
Through you, your worship.
Yes, Deputy Mayor.
So in reference to the zoning bylaw, we had an update of a memo that went through to us in regards to 3 point, give me one quick sec here, just gonna scan to it. 3.29 for mobile vending facilities. So it gives reference to a permit or a permit in that actual line item, but yet later on we're repealing the permit process. So I was just wondering, I know it's a change, but is that just a change so we could bring something through quicker without having a hearing of objections? Like, I'm just wondering, it's third reading, I'm wondering why that memo came out.
So I can answer
Mr.
that.
Gopin, can you address that? I think. it
Yeah,
means something a little
I
bit
think
different.
there might just be a little confusion. The memo and the rescinding that's happening later in the meeting, that's the amendment to the peddler's permit bylaw. Because of this change that was made in the zoning bylaw quite some time ago in the steering committee phase, I mean, over a year ago now, probably. So this is not a recent change to the zoning bylaw, but because of it is a change from Z18 to Z21, it means that the discussion we were having last time about the peddler's permit and the amendments that would need to happen to that, it's a different situation for that. So this is not a change in the zoning bylaw. It's the change is about what needs to happen to the peddler's permit bylaw based on this clause in the zoning bylaw. I hope that clears it up.
Through your worship. Yeah, I understand that. It's just when I saw it referenced to the permit, I assumed that was the permit that we issued through the peddler's permit of the town. And now if we basically pull that out, the permit process is completely changed where it can be just issued by town staff. Not that it couldn't have been before, but it's just, I don't know. It just feels like we're on third reading, repealing another bylaw, and it just feels, the timing feels a little odd to be doing this in third reading.
Your worship, I can speak to that.
Yes, Mr. Hopper.
So through you, your worship, just within this, the rescinding of the peddler's permit is the rescinding of the first reading of the peddler's permit. It has no bearing on the zoning bylaw 2101. When zoning bylaw 2101 becomes enacted, then that becomes the new standard. And within that, the peddler's permit is still active. It's just, it gives more flexibility for the ability to have either longer term agreements or the issuing of peddler's permits is still there. It takes some steps out of the zoning bylaw process from like PRAC and those. But in order to do proper clerking abilities, we do need to basically rescind the first reading of the peddler's permit, and we'll still be able to issue permits based on it.
So just to clarify one last time. So when we were looking at amending the peddler's permit before, that was done in error, and we shouldn't have done it because this supersedes it. Is that correct to say?
Through you, your worship,
Well,
that's
well-
correct. After deeper review of the wording, and because we went back and we really took a hard look at this to make sure the wording was accurate, because we went back and forth with the peddler's permit, trying to work it for the 182 Water Street as council was supporting. This process through further review of the zoning bylaw and the wording that has changed will allow us within the peddler's permit to issue permits accordingly. So the answer to it is yes, it meets all the requirements.
And if I may, your worship, too, just to add,
Yes, sir.
part of the problem, Deputy Mayor, too, was that because we got two that are town solicitor isn't part of the zoning process, he actually was referring to the older zoning bylaw and not the updated one. So when we kind of reconciled it to the bylaw that's going to be in place now, it's been amended, and it's been the same amendment since the first reading. We haven't made any changes to that section, as Mr. Gopin said. And so once we realized that was the case, then we realized that we made an error when we were trying to adjust to the old version of the zoning bylaw, that the new version of the zoning bylaw allows mobile vending units through the allowance of the existing peddler's permit. The problem was before, the old zoning bylaw didn't allow mobile restaurants at all.
So in other words, the peddler's permit bylaw is still in force. We're simply rescinding the amendments we thought we had to make to it because we don't need that anymore. And mobile food units are allowed under certain circumstances under the new zoning bylaw. In fact, it's much more flexible than if they were allowed, but there still is a permit process that has to be gone through, a permit agreement process that has to be gone through with senior town staff. Correct?
Correct.
Good.
Councillor Grew, you were,
Councillor Group?
You're on mute.
you're on mute, Councillor Grew.
Thank you, Your Worship. Before I start, I just want to thank the planners for all the hard work they've done. But in my opinion, this bylaw is not ready for passage at this time. It's not ready for third reading. There are numerous errors. There's inconsistencies in the bylaw. The former medical center is zoned as residential. Kingsbury Arms is zoned as residential. The bylaw permits Airbnbs in every residential property with no permits or regard for public safety. Although we're referring to it does refer to the short-term rental agreement or rental bylaw that we just talked about. The zoning bylaw falls short on protecting the public. The zoning bylaw also introduces, and my favorite pet peeve is chickens, into town with little regard for the noise and about the 1,500 pounds of excrement that's going to be produced every year by the 4 chickens that are allowed in this bylaw. And also, to me, the fact that we have 2 amendments to this bylaw this evening, even before this bylaw has been passed third reading, indicates that, to me, that this bylaw is not ready for third reading at this time. And there's even more amendments that are to come. So again, it's sort of like, I think we need to take that little pause and say, are we ready for third reading on this? I know we have to pass it, or there's haste, a certain urgency to pass it before this council ends its term, but I have a bit of concerns with regards to whether this bylaw is ready. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Grew. Mr. Gopin, I'd ask your view on whether there is both urgency and whether or not anything we're proposing to do later tonight is in any way contrary to the notion that we could have third reading of this bylaw tonight.
No, thank you, Your Worship. No, nothing is in contrary. In fact, if you don't do third reading of this now, then you won't be able to proceed with the rezoning of 108 Sophia. We've talked about the zoning bylaw extensively. We've had 2 public hearings. We really haven't heard anything from the public since the most recent public hearing. There's been lots of opportunity to bring up issues, and I think they've been brought up and dealt with appropriately. So I think you have developments that are waiting to proceed based on this bylaw being passed, and it's absolutely ready to be passed. And I think it's certainly in the best interest of the town to do so, and to do so tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Gopin. And I guess I think I am right to say that all bylaws are subject to amendments, even ones that are just freshly passed can be amended at any point into the future. So an incoming council can look at this again when they get organized and decide that they want to make further changes, and then it'll end up back on your desk, correct?
Yep.
All right. Okay. Council, anyone else?
And Your Worship, Your Worship, can I just speak for a quick second? Yeah, just to allay some of Councillor Grew's concerns about the other amendments coming forward. No matter what zoning bylaw version we were at, those are going to be there anyway. So it's just as easy, because if we made the amendments to this existing bylaw, then we're going to have to go through the public process all over again. Otherwise, we're going to go through it by going through third reading of this zoning bylaw and making it amendments right away on them, which just happened to be a bad timing thing more than bad planning, honestly. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Spear. Anyone else on council want to comment?
Yeah, I think we're ready for the question.
Yep, I am ready. Deputy Mayor, you had a comment.
Yeah, it's just I just don't know. I see some of Councillor Gru's concerns. I know we've worked on a lot and Mr. Gopin's correct. It's just, I don't know. I don't see passing it this meeting or the next meeting when it hurts. So it gives us more time to, and I know we've had a lot, but municipal plan took a while. And you know, second and third, we're running out of time, but yeah, I'm just not 100% sure on everything on it right now either. So I'd actually present a motion to table.
Council,
I'm not sure what issues we want to table it over. What I heard Councillor Gru talk about was that Kingsbury Arms, which no one knew about till last week, Sophia, which no one knew about till last week, there's probably something right now we still don't know about that's going to need to be fixed 2 weeks from now. So unless we're going for perfection here, and if we are, we're never passing a zoning bylaw. We're always going to be chasing our tails. I think really we need to push this over the line and let the next council start finding out the next Kingsbury Arms issue, the next Sophia issue, and then fix it in due course.
Your worship, if I could just add, and I'll be very blunt here, is the medical center being zoned as residential. Okay, that's not something that is new. It's been there for a long time. It should have been picked up. It wasn't. That was an error. That was an oversight. Kingsbury Arms being zoned as residential. Again, it's been there for years. It's not something new. It should have been picked up. And it just, I don't know, it shows that there are some inconsistencies, some errors, and this is a new bylaw that is supposed to stand the test of time and last for a great long length of period. And my difficulty is I'm coming into a meeting, passing a bylaw, and then within 15 or 20 minutes, passing 2 amendments to that bylaw that we just passed.
But the reason we're doing that is because it's taken us so long to get this passed. We have businesses that want to move forward and grow our town. Had we passed this 6 months ago, we wouldn't need to amend it. You know, it would be in the normal course of things. But because we're taking so long to get this over the finish line, we have these concurrent processes now.
But
so I say get it over that finish line, and then you can have normal amendments. Oh, like it's always amended.
I'll just say this, is my philosophy is to do it right, not to do it fast. And I'm just saying is right now, I have concerns that we haven't done it right.
But I think your philosophy is not to do it right. It's just to talk about it for 8 months, 6, you know, a continual discussion about how possibly it could be a bit better this way, a bit better that way. We can talk about that for years and decades to come because it's a zoning bylaw. They're never perfect. They, by their very nature, it's us trying to balance a million different competing wants and interests and needs. There's always going to be issues. So why don't we just get it over that line, and then we can deal with the issues on one-on-one basis.
And anyway, I've said my piece.
Excuse me, just sorry, Your Worship, just point of order. There is a motion to table right now. So why don't we take care of that, and then they can get the seconder before you debate whether you table or not.
And remember, if we table it, we got to talk about this again.
Well, yes, and I would also like to know what is the, Mr. Gopin, is there any effect to us tabling this? I just want a bit of information here, other than tabling it.
Yeah, so if you table it, if you're going to make any substantial changes, which include changing any property zone, and you can't change 108 Sophia without amending the municipal plan, which is why we started with that tonight. So that isn't something that can just be changed. And Kingsbury Arms had a PAC variance to be a residential tourist home, so it should remain as a residential property. I don't see these as issues, first of all. And second of all, if you do table it, this council will not pass the zoning bylaw because you do not have time to have a public hearing and to, there's no chance to make substantial changes. So by tabling it tonight, you're saying that you will not be passing this zoning bylaw in your mandate.
Thank you, Mr. Gopa. Mr. Knopper, I was going to ask you pretty much the same question about the timing of this and what effect it has. And I would go one step further if this, Mr. Knopper, if we determine that we should call the question on this eventually tonight and it does not pass to third reading, what's the effect of that?
Chris, maybe you want to touch on that.
Well, I'll have Xander confirm it, but you've basically beaten the bylaw and you're gonna have to start with first reading eventually, correct, Mr.? You defeated the bylaw process at the third reading stage.
Yeah, I think it defaults to the Local Governance Act. So if that's the Local Governance Act, then yeah.
Right. Okay, good. Go back to Mr. Spear. Thank you, Mr. Spear, for reminding me that we have an amendment or a motion to table. So I will now look for a seconder for that motion to table. I can't see everybody on my screen, unfortunately.
There doesn't seem to be anybody, Your Worship, from what I'm
Okay.
seeing.
Alrighty, if there's no one, then therefore that fails, and I will then call the question. All in favor of going to third reading of the zoning bylaw, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Sorry.
Any opposed?
I'm opposed.
Councillor Grew, so noted. That is
Deputy-
passed, and I will now read the zoning bylaw. Or-
Excuse me, Your Worship, I've got a bad connection, but Deputy Mayor, did you oppose it? I didn't hear you or see you.
I did, yeah.
Okay,
Oh,
so
sorry.
4-2, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. We'll now move to third reading by title. And I just inform the public that the full bylaw, word for word, runs to 107 pages. So here we go, long enough, read by title, this 15th day of March, 2021. Under contents, 1.0 title and scope, 1.1 definitions, 2.0 administrative and interpretive clauses, 2.1 zoning classifications, 2.2 powers of the town council, 2.3 special powers of the planning advisory committee and regional service commission, 2.4 licenses, permits, and compliance with other bylaws, 2.5 metric measurements, 2.6 zone boundaries, 2.7 zoning bylaw amendments, 2.8 uses permitted, 2.9 interpretation, 2.10 images, 2.11 the use of italics and underlining, 2.12 development permits and fees, 3.0 general provisions, 3.1 in permitted uses and requirements, 3.2 number of buildings on a lot, 3.3 existing undersized lots, 3.4 existing buildings, 3.5 non-conforming uses, 3.6 uses permitted in all zones, 3.7 uses prohibited in all zones, 3.8 utilities and infrastructure, 3.9 access to lots, 3.10 mixed uses, 3.11 reduced frontage on a curve, 3.112 line of vision at an intersection, 3.13 accessory buildings or structures erected prior to main building, 3.14 height exceptions, 3.15 prohibition regarding yards and other open spaces, 3.16 building and structure projections, permitted encroachments, 3.17 enclosures for swimming pools, 3.18 power lines over swimming pools, 3.19 finished floor above grade, 3.20 garbage storage, 3.21 fences, 3.22 exterior lighting or illumination devices, 3.23 change of lot by infilling or excavation, 3.24 keeping of livestock and chickens, 3.25 queuing spaces, 3.26 car and bicycle parking requirements, 3.27 parking lot and driveway requirements, 3.28 loading standards, 3.29 mobile vending facilities, 3.30 landscape buffers and landscaped areas, 3.31 setback from ordinary high water mark, 3.32 development within town plat and environs and historic business district, 3.33 licensed premises, 3.34 short-term rentals, 3.35 protection from deer, 3.36 windows in historic business district, 4.0 residential zones, 4.1 general provisions in all residential zones, 4.1.1 requirements for row housing dwellings, 4.1.2 private garages and carports, 4.1.3 uses prohibited in certain yards, 4.1.4 landscaping, 4.1.5 residential development near a lagoon or treatment plant, 4.1.6 portable or temporary garages, 4.1.7 accessory uses, building and structures in the residential zone, 4.1.8 home daycares, 4.1.9 home-based businesses, 4.1.10 bed and breakfasts, 4.1.11 boarding houses, 4.1.12 group homes, 4.1.13 standards for apartment dwellings, senior citizens housing and residential care, 4.1.14 amenity space requirements for apartment dwellings, senior citizens housing and residential care facilities, 4.1.15 requirements for two-family dwellings, triplexes and converted dwellings, 4.2 SR service residential zone, 4.2.1 SR zone permitted uses, 4.2.2 SR zone uses subject to terms and conditions, conditional uses, 4.2.3 SR zone standards, 4.2.4 accessory building height, 4.2.5 use of front yards, 4.2.6 minimum ground floor area, 4.3 SRC service residential and culture zone, 4.3.1 SRC zone permitted uses, 4.3.2 application of SR zone to SRC zone, 4.4 ER estate residential zone, 4.4.1 ER zone permitted uses, 4.4.2 zone uses, ER zone uses subject to terms and conditions, conditional use, 4.3, 4.4.3 ER zone standards, 4.4.4 accessory building height, 4.4.5 use of front yards, 4.4.6 minimum ground floor area, 4.5 MR1 multiple residential zone, 4.5.1 MR1 zone permitted uses, 4.5.2 converted dwelling units, 4.5.3 MR1 zone standards, 4.5.4 accessory building height, 4.5.5 use of front yards, 4.5.6 minimum floor area, 4.6 MR2 high density multiple residential zone outside town plat and environs, 4.6.1 permitted uses, 4.6.2 MR2 zone standards, 4.6.3 accessory building height, 4.6.4 use of front yards, 4.6.5 minimum floor area, 5.0 commercial zones, 5.1 general provisions for all commercial zones, 5.1.1 commercial landscaping and screening requirements, 5.1.2 accessory buildings and structures in commercial zones, 5.1.3 special requirements for auto-oriented uses and gas bars, 5.2 CC Central Commercial Zone, 5.2.1 CC zone permitted uses. 5.2.2 CC zone uses subject to terms and conditions, conditional use. 5.2.3 CC zone standard. 5.2. Use of front yards. 5.3 TC tourist commercial zone. 5.3.1 TC zone permitted uses. 5.3.2 TC zone uses subject to terms and conditions, conditional uses. 5.3.3 TC zone uses subject to a bylaw amendment. 5.3.4 TC zone standards. 5.3.5 side and rear yards adjacent to residential zones. 5.3.6 use of front yards. 5.4 MU mixed use zone. 5.5.1 mixed use permitted uses. 5.4.2 mixed use zone use subject to terms and conditions, conditional uses. 5.4.3 change of use requiring approval. 5.4.4 MU zone standards. 6.0 institutional zone. 6.1 institutional zone. 6.1.1 institutional zone permitted uses. 6.1.2 institutional zone uses subject to terms and conditions, conditional use. 6.1.3 institutional zone requirements. 6.1.4 screening. 7.0 environmental recreational zones. 7.1 GS zone. 7.1.1 GS zone permitted uses. 7.1 development standards. 7.2 ESA zone. 7.2.1 ESA zone permitted uses. 7.2.2 development standards. 7.3 NI zone. 7.3.1 NI zone permitted uses. 7.3.2 NI zone standards. 7.3.3 use of front yards. 7.3.4 maximum floor area. 7.3.5 trees. 7.3.6 garbage removal. 7.3.7 services. 7.3.8 environmental health considerations. 7.4 SLR overlay zone. 8.0 signage. 8.1 definitions. 8.2 administration. 8.3 signage permits. 8.4 applications and plans. 8.5 signage variances. 8.6 prohibited signs. 8.7 number of signs on residential properties. 8.8 number of signs on commercial properties. 8.9 number of signs in institutional and green space zones. 8.10 sign area calculations. 8.11 general standards for signs. 8.12 standards for specific types of signs. 8.12.1 fascia signs. 8.12.2 freestanding signs. 8.12.3 awnings. 8.12.4 street banners. 8.12.5 non-commercial temporary signs. 8.12.6 projecting or flag signs. 8.12.7 window signs. 8.13 maintenance signs. 8.14 non-conforming existing signs. 8.15 elections signs. 8.16 exemptions. 8.17 abandoned and unlawful signs. 8.18 refusal of a sign permit. 8.19 revocation of a sign permit. 9.0 repeal and transition. Schedule A zoning map. Schedule B map of the historic business district, town plat and environs. Schedule C sea level rise SLR overlay zone map. Read for the third time on March the 15th, 2021. All right. Thank you, Council.
Well,
Good job, Your Worship.
We move on.
PED 210203 A, B, and C. Amendment Z21-02 to zoning bylaw Z21-01 for rezoning 108 Sophia Street. The applicant, Dr. Tammy Matheson and Dr. Krista McAllister, are requesting the rezoning of 108 Sophia Street from SR, being service residential zone, to MU, being mixed use zone. This rezoning also requires changing the property's designation on the municipal generalized future land use map from residential to commercial. And staff provided reports from the planners at the Southwest New Brunswick Service Commission. So the first motion is PED 210203A. That motion is that council grant leave for first reading to bylaw Z21-02, a bylaw to amend bylaw Z21-01, being zoning bylaw for the town of St. Andrews.
Thank you, Councilor Harrison. Could I have a seconder for that motion?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Councilor Bishop. Comments from council?
Your worship?
Yes, Councilor Groot.
Thank you. I just want to start by saying I generally support the vet clinic coming to St. Andrews. I think it's going to be a welcome addition to town. And I probably will be a potential customer. But having said that, I am concerned that there is an appearance of conflict of interest since the town has already sold the property conditional upon this rezoning. Although I will be voting for this amendment, I want to reassure the public that I retain an open mind and will not hesitate to vote against the amendment if there are significant objections raised by the public to this. Mr. Gopin spoke earlier about heritage conditions to the rezoning, but I don't see these conditions in the proposed amendment. And I would suggest that perhaps in the interests of transparency and openness, that we just add to the amendment at the very end, say, subject to the following conditions, and add the 4 conditions that Mr. Gopin has recommended from a heritage perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Groot. Anyone else want to comment? Mr. Gopin.
What I'd like to do is propose an amendment to the motion and to say, subject to the following conditions at the tail end of it, and incorporate the 4 conditions that Mr. Gopin identified in his planner's report. And that way there, when people are looking at this and they're reviewing the bylaw and they're doing their notice of objections, they're fully aware of what those conditions are.
Mr. Spear, could you just, thank you, Councilor Groot. Mr. Spear, could you just comment on that? Those conditions were written into the purchase and sale agreement. Is that not the case? Or at least the condition of the heritage conditions? And I would ask Mr. Gopin to advise whether or not, those conditions are something, obviously we could do that, but are those necessary to be done in terms of this amendment to give force to those conditions? Mr. Spear?
Thank you, Worship. I'll go first and just, yes, they actually came above from a meeting that we had with the council prior to selling the building about some of the conditions you wanted. And then once it was determined to the potential purchaser, maybe we added the ones about the outdoor kenneling, but that is in the current purchase and sale agreement. Not saying that adding those into the bylaw may not be appropriate, but Mr. Gopin can comment on that because I think I've already asked something along that lines.
Yeah, they are in the condition of sale agreement. We know that conditions that council adds at this point as part of rezoning are totally enforceable. and I think that's the reason to add them in at this stage as well. It makes it a bylaw enforcement issue and not just a legal matter. So it's an additional layer of protection for the town. And it's something that is to the point in the bylaw adoption process, sometime before third reading. But if you want to add them, I think it is. I think Councillor Groom makes a good point that for people to know what these conditions are, so they don't just see the vet think, you know, loud barking dogs and they're going to be outside all the time and say, oh, there's a condition that they have to be inside. I think that transparency does make a lot of sense. So adding it now, no reason not to.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gopin. So, all right, so we have a motion to amend put forward by Councillor Groop. Could I have a seconder?
I'll
for that
second
motion?
that, Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Akaji. So any other comments from council before, and we will just simply add the recommendations, which are also in the already in the purchase and sale agreement, to the bylaw amendment. All right, if there's no more comments, I'll call the question. All in favor of the amendment to the bylaw? Or, all in favor of the bylaw as amended, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that is passed. Okay, Councillor Harrison.
PED 210203B, that council, or the motion is that council sets the day of Thursday, April 15th, 2021 at 6 p.m. for a public hearing of objections to amendment Z21-02 to zoning bylaw Z21-01 for rezoning 108 Sophia Street as per section 111 of the Community Planning Act.
Okay, could I have a seconder for that motion?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Councillor Bishop. Any comments? If not, I'll call the question. All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion is passed. And back to Councillor Harrison.
PED 210203C, the motion is that council obtains the written views of PRAC for amendment Z21-01 to zoning bylaw Z21-01 for rezoning 108 Sophia Street as per section 110 of the Community Planning Act.
I have a second.
This should be amendment Z21-02, sorry.
Okay,
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Akaji. Any comments, council? If not, I'll call the question. All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none. Now I need to go back. Someone, I don't have the amended version of the first reading. If someone could provide that to me, Mr. Gopin or Mr. Spear or Mr. Knopper.
Your worship,
Yes.
if I may, the conditions are on page 119 of your package.
Thank you, Councilor.
So if you just add the clause subject to the following conditions, and those are the 4 conditions, we should be good to go.
Sorry, folks, I'm just got a little bit too much paper here. Okay, I will now read bylaw number Z21-02. This is a bylaw to amend bylaw number Z21-01, being zoning bylaw for the town of St. Andrews. By the council of the town of St. Andrews as follows. 1. Bylaw number Z21-01, the zoning bylaw for the town of St. Andrews is amended by changing the zone as shown on the zoning map attached to the said bylaw as Schedule A thereof for the land shown on Schedule I, or Schedule 1, I guess it is, quote unquote. Hereto informing part hereto from SR Service Residential Zone to MU Mixed Use Zone, subject to the following conditions. 1, all campus must remain open. 2, any future use must be similar to or compatible with the veterinary clinic and the surrounding residential neighborhood in the opinion of the development officer. The upper windows and gables must be maintained. If repair of an existing window or gable element is not possible, replacement must be bracket or adequate facsimile size and style of the element being replaced. And 4, vinyl siding must not be used in any repair or restoration. If restoration of the current siding is not possible, materials that mimic the current siding, such as engineered wood, concrete fiberboard, or equivalent, must be used. And for the first time this 15th day of March, 2021. Thank you, Councilor Harrison, and thank you, Council. Okay.
Okay. PED 210204 B, C, and D. Amendments or Amendment MP 20-03 to Municipal Plan Bylaw MP 20-01 for rezoning 108 Sophia Street. The applicant, Dr. Tammy Matheson and Dr. Krista McAllister, are requesting the rezoning of 108 Sophia Street from SR Service Residential Zone to MU Mixed Use Zone. An amendment is needed to the municipal plan MP 20-01 to accommodate the request. So the first motion is PED 210203B, that council grant leave for first reading to bylaw number MP 20-03, a bylaw to amend bylaw number MP 20-01, being municipal plan bylaw for the town of St. Andrews.
Could I have a seconder for that motion, please?
I'll second.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Michelle. Council, any comments? I'll call the question. All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none. That motion is passed. The other two motions, and we'll go back and read the.
So the next motion then is PED 210203C, that council sets the date of Thursday, April 15th, 2021 at 6:15 p.m. for a public hearing of objections to amendment MP 20-03 to municipal plan bylaw MP 20-01 for rezoning 108 Sophia Street as per section 111 of the Community Planning Act.
Okay, could I have a seconder for that motion, please?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Councilor Bishop. Any comments from staff or from council? If not, I'll call the question. All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none. That motion is passed. Councilor Harrison will move on to the last motion.
PED 210203D. The motion is that council obtain the written views of PRAC for amendment MP 20-03 to municipal plan bylaw MP 20-01 for rezoning 108 Sophia Street as per section 110 of the Community Planning Act.
Thank you, Councilor Harrison. Can I have a seconder for that motion, please?
I'll second that.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Akaji. Any questions, council? If not, I'll call the question. All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion is also passed. So now I will go back and I will read for the first time bylaw.
We've lost you, Mayor.
Your worship, it'll be on page 123 of your package.
Lost the sound.
You're just too far away from it. It's not picking it up.
Too much paperwork. Okay, I'll start again. This is bylaw number MP 20-03, a bylaw to amend bylaw number MP 20-01, being municipal plan bylaw for the town of St. Andrews. Be it enacted by the council of the town of St. Andrews as follows. 1, bylaw number MP 20-01, the municipal plan bylaw for the town of St. Andrews is amended by changing the designation as shown on the generalized future land use map attached to the said bylaw as Schedule A thereof of the land shown on Schedule 1 attached hereto and forming hereof from residential designation to commercial designation. Read for the first time on the 15th of March, 2021. Okay.
So I guess it's more for me. PD 210201 A, B, and C. Amendment Z21-03 to zoning bylaw Z21-01 for rezoning 152 Water Street. The applicant, Karen Leggett, is requesting the rezoning of 152 Water Street from the central commercial zone to the mixed-use zone. Provided with this motion is a report is the proposed rezoning plan amendment Z21-03 and planner's report on the request for 152 Water Street. So the motion is for PED 210201A that council grant leave for first reading to bylaw number Z21-03, a bylaw to amend bylaw number Z21-01, being zoning bylaw for the town of St. Andrews.
Thank you, Councilor Harrison. Can I have a seconder for that motion, please?
I'll second it.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Bishop. Comments from council?
And you'll see over my shoulder is the property in question, because I wanted it to be interactive tonight.
Nice.
Your worship, I'd
Yeah.
like to make a comment if I may.
Yes, certainly, Councilor Michelle.
Michelle here. Although I'll vote in favor of this going to public consultation. I have some considerable reservations about this development of another house in the commercial zone with no provision for the storefront going in. There's no timeline for the storefront going in, and if anything, that should be a storefront in the heart of our downtown business district. And although I'm sure there's an intention to put it there, there doesn't seem to be any way for us to ensure that it does indeed go in there at some point in the future. So my concern is that we have the cart before the horse a little bit, the proverbial cart before the horse. However, I will support it at this time and look forward to members of the public coming forward if they have similar reservations to me. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you, Councilor Gumichel. Any other comments?
Deputy Mayor, Your Worship.
Yeah, oh, sorry. Deputy Mayor Henderson?
Okay. So just a quick one for us. So if we begin this process and actually vote on the motion, and then we eventually say it's getting late in the game and we decline it, does that mean that it's squashed for 6 months? Like if council has apprehensions to doing this and we want the next, council to deal that, shouldn't we table it now versus halfway through the process, squash it, and then they wait for 6 months? Like it might be hurting them more to begin this process than starting. And I don't want to hand this to the next council during second or third reading. So that's just my only apprehension for the best interest of the applicant. This council doing it, if we're having apprehensions, may not be the best council to do it.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any other comments? Mr. Gopin, do you want to comment on that in terms of what this process would look like?
Your worship, I have a comment to make as well.
Sure, certainly.
Thank you, your worship. First off, the information on this particular application, I understand was only received in March. We only got all the information in March. There is no separate PID number for the property that they want to rezone. It's a rezoning of a partial PID, which is kind of something we haven't done too much of. And I have the same concerns that Councillor Gumashell expressed, is that there are no guarantees that the front property will be developed into a commercial establishment. And in my mind, this whole thing just speaks volumes that it should be some sort of development agreement with the rezoning of the property, and have conditions that certain things should be done so that the town's interests are protected. Because if we rezone this thing to mixed use, there are no guarantees that anything else will happen down the road other than having a house built on this portion of the property. So I think that we need to take pause here, and I think it's something that should be tabled, and the next council should start fresh with this whole issue and determine what's in the best interests of the town. And I don't think that passing a rezoning like this at our last council meeting in May is in the best interests of our community. There's no urgency here. There's no building that's going to be built next week or next month. So there is time to wait and reflect on this and make a sound decision rather than a hasty decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green.
The dog agrees too.
I'd like to make a motion to table this.
Thank you, Councillor Bishop. I will look for a seconder for that motion to table. Councillor Grew. Now that we have that on the table as a possible table, anyone else want to speak to the issue, or do you want me to call the vote? I'm happy to do so. No?
Your worship.
I'll call Councillor Gumashell.
Councillor Gumashell here. Just again, I think could we go over again what the deputy mayor was saying? If we do table it at this time, that's it for 6 months, or I mean, there's a public hearing of objections coming up. Couldn't we squeeze that in and not kill it at this time? Because I mean,
the only way we can have a public hearing, well, I could get Mr. Knopper, you could maybe outline that, but we need to have something to put before the public at a public, and that's not until we get it on the table. So I think what's being said here, and if we table this, it can still be brought back as soon as council might decide to have more information and bring it back. We could bring it back to this council. What I think is being suggested here is that this should be tabled, and the proponent should be told that this will be tabled to the next council, the sitting of the next council after the May the 10th election. And so that in fairness to the applicant, but no, it's not the same as if we defeated a motion at third reading of an amendment. That has a whole different place. So this is still an open case. It just means we're not dealing with it tonight and may not want to deal with it at all during the rest of the term of our council. If that's the way I interpret it, if I'm correct, Mr. Knopper.
That's correct, your worship.
Yeah. I'll call the question unless anyone else.
Can I ask kind of further to Councillor Gumashell, and before I ask, I guess a question before I say anything is, if we did a first reading, how many months do we have to complete the process? Or, and by we, I mean us or the new council coming in. There's a clock on that, isn't there?
Through your worship, I think it's 6 months between readings. Is that correct?
I believe it's 6 months from the notice of objections.
Okay,
If I may, under the Community Planning Act, it is 6 months from the hearing of objections. I'm not sure if you have your own procedural bylaws or if there's something in the Local Governance Act that would also apply. But if you haven't called under the Community Planning Act, if you don't call for first reading, if you don't call for a public hearing, then there is no clock ticking.
I'm just wondering if we can have the best of both worlds, do a first reading, so at least there's a public presentation or some way to get it in front of the public without us intending to be the ones to take it over the finish line, but at least so the process is started. And then if the next council wants to put it on the back burner, so be it, or if they want to complete it, so be it, but at least it's moving forward. But we don't need to do it on an expedited timeline for us, our council.
The challenge I see there is if this council votes against it tonight, then it's really dead.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if we want to do that at this point. I think it's something we want to leave for the next council, let them make the decision, because as it stands right now, I'm not comfortable voting for this one because there's too many missing pieces, and it sets a precedent in the form of are we going to start rezoning pieces of properties now?
Through your worship.
Yes.
I do appreciate what Councillor Harrison's hoping to accomplish is he doesn't want this to take 12 months in order for it to go through with red tape. But the reality is we pass first reading and we do the hearing of objections, the next council isn't going to have the feedback. It would have been to this council. So there will actually probably, I'm assuming, want to do their own hearing of objections, therefore opening it up to 2 hearing of objections. So I'm a big believer that if we can't do third reading, we shouldn't do first reading. We should let the new council go through the process, not to go back, but I do think that it was a big challenge that we had with the heritage bylaw, that we were taking down a path that we weren't part of since day one, and we didn't get to have a voice in how the public feedback was going to happen. So that lesson for me is, I remember my first years is I thought to myself, when I'm leaving council, I want to make sure that nothing is sitting in second and third reading and we don't have to. And that's just where I'm at.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Anybody else want to comment?
Kind of summed it up, didn't he?
Yeah, I think I'm going to call the question. We have a motion to table this matter, and it's been seconded. I will now call the question. All in favor of the motion to table this matter, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. We will table this matter, and staff will inform the applicant.
And then I see no point in reading B and C. We don't need
No.
to rescind them or do anything like that. We just don't read them.
No.
Right. Okay. Councilor Finch, over. to you. Just question period and.
No
comments,
closed
that's
or
all.
anything?
No closed this evening, no.
Okay, I may sign off.
Okay.
Aye.
Thank you.
FA 210104B, dated March 10th, 21. The subject rescind amendment number 1 to bylaw number 75, regulating licensing of peddlers and transient traders, first reading. The background. Based on the regulations for mobile food vendors. The new regulations allow council to sign into agreements with mobile vendors based on policy criteria and conditions agreed upon. The motion, that council moves to rescind first reading of amendment number 1 to bylaw 75, regulating and licensing peddlers and transient traders.
Thank you, Councillor Bishop. Could I have a seconder for that motion, please?
I'll second it.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Apogee. Questions, Council?
Your worship?
Yes, Councillor Groot.
Just a question on this is I know that the language in the zoning bylaw has been clarified somewhat so that we can issue a permit. The question I have, I guess, is for the town. That says you can't do it. And I'm not sure how we deal with that and if there's an easy button we can push with regards to the peddler's permit. I think that the way I saw it before is the clerk could issue 6-week permits in succession under the peddler's permit bylaw, and I'm just not sure how that's going to work. So if I can get some clarification from maybe the town clerk or the CAO on if we rescind this, are we going to be causing ourselves a problem?
Thank you. I just got a message from the town clerk. I think his computer's died on him, although I see him moving a bit. Did you want to respond, Mr. Knopper, or do you want me to run with it? Guess I'll run with it. I don't hear him breathing over there. So it's okay. So what's happened is the zoning bylaw actually allows for it. So the prior versions of the zoning bylaw did not allow these mobile vending units. That was the whole issue. And that's why we were amending the earlier versions. But once we re-looked at the upcoming version of the zoning bylaw, it actually allows for it. So now the peddler's permit can, as Councilor Groot said, be issued in consecutive orders. I still think we got to come up with a stronger policy because, again, anytime staff is left to make judgment calls, it may not be to the best benefit. And so we may put something forward to this council the next on what's decided. So for instance, the person at 182 Water Street, we made them put up quite a bit of structures and stuff and screening and things. And so I think as a minimum for anything that's long term, we want to look at items like that. But if, I don't know, if I was having a birthday party for my child and wanted to bring in a food vendor truck for 4 hours in the afternoon just to feed my family, now we're allowed to be able to authorize that.
Yeah, I just want to ensure that we're not opening the door to a whole series of food vending trucks coming to town inadvertently. We want to make sure that this is a one-off temporary thing that doesn't create a new precedent or something like that. That's my whole thought process on that is we got to be careful we're not setting a new precedent. Does that make sense, or is that
To be clear, no, it makes perfect sense. But to be 100% clear, just out of the whim of the clerk, he could allow 500 food trucks right now in the town. That's why it's important to but we know better, we're not going to, but that's why it'd be better to have a formalized policy about what constitutes this, that what we allow. And like I said, we started this for this development at 182 Water, very special circumstances and very much more than just setting up a mobile unit on the corner. It's, they're investing in a lot on property owned. So I think that's the next step, is whether it's through policy or through an update to the peddler's permit bylaw, we've got to come up with a stronger policy about under what conditions can food trucks be in St. Andrews for a longer term, longer than a few hour period.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments? Yeah, the purpose tonight is just to rescind the amendment that we started to pass because that doesn't get us where we want to go. But I concur with what the Chief Administrative Officer has said. I think council, even this council, even though we're getting long in the tooth, we would like to see the recommendations for a policy from our staff and from our planners to say what should a policy look like, you know, so that they can properly administer it under the existing zoning bylaw and the existing peddlers bylaw. So that's good. With a little more work that needs to be done. So anyway, if anybody else wants to comment, that's fine, but if not, I'll call the question. All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. That motion is passed. I don't need to read this because we're rescinding it, correct?
Shaking
Or do I?
his head, yes.
Yeah,
Shaking his head, I
well,
do have to read this. So,
well,
No,
no, because we never got the third reading, so the bylaw didn't exist. Basically, what we're doing is we're sending the first reading of the bylaw.
right. So I don't have to state what we had passed.
Yes, that's correct. We're
Right.
basically reversing the motion for first reading from a couple of months ago.
Okay, perfect. Council, we move on. That last thing that is on the agenda. We don't have any new business, and we'll look for question period. Are we going to be able to do that? Is Mr. Knopper up and running there?
nope,
Mm,
no, he's not.
Well, just give me a moment, Your Worship. I can jump over to Facebook and see if there's anything there. I'm sure a couple of our counselors are already there anyway. Oh,
Not
he
me.
actually texted me. I have received no questions from the public. I'll have to shut down and restart.
Okay, no problem. All right.
Through your
Council,
worship.
Deputy Mayor's comments. Does anyone have comments this evening?
Through your worship.
Yes,
Is
Deputy Mayor.
it possible for, just to take a moment for Mr. Spear, maybe to call Mr. Knopper on a cell phone, just to, because if someone sat through the whole meeting and they
Right.
emailed a question in,
Yeah.
maybe he could just relay it to Mr. Spear to pass on to us, because I'd hate to go for a 2-hour meeting where someone's been waiting for their question and they don't get the opportunity.
Good point. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Mr. Spear, could you see if you could reach Mr. Knopper?
I can see his fingers moving.
No, nothing has come as of yet, Your Worship.
Okay, good.
Council.
Thank you. Council comments, your big chance, but we're at 8:02.
Hmm.
Your Worship,
Yes,
I just have one comment I'd like to
Sure.
make, and it relates back to the short-term rental bylaw. I just want to reiterate that this is a big positive step forward for the town, because under the current bylaw, short-term rentals were not permitted. So the town is moving forward with a bylaw that sort of strikes a good balance. It allows short-term rentals. It protects the public. It respects the rights of neighbors and provides a level playing field with the existing short-term rental providers. So I think staff has done a lot of hard work to try and reach that balance, and to have a bylaw that's fairly simple, a lot shorter than what was previously brought before the public. So I'm hoping the public, when they see the new short-term rental bylaw, will like what they see. Thank you.
thank you, Councilor Group. Anyone else have a comment?
Worship.
Deputy Mayor does.
Oh, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I'll let Mr. Spear confirm, but just, it is March 15th, and just want to remind anyone that's tuning in, that's usually people that are, very interested in municipal politics would be the only ones maybe left right now. But just a reminder that beginning in nominations for the municipal election open up on March 20th. So we're right around the corner for that. So if anyone's interested, they can go to Elections NB website for more information, or of course stop by Town Hall, and I'm sure town staff would be more than willing to explain the process to them. Yeah, here, it's your opportunity. A lot of people have provided feedback over the last 5 years, and we certainly welcome more people raising their hand for the community. I think it'll probably be some counselors leaving, some counselors staying, but the more people that run in the election, the better it is for the community. So ultimately, people can make a choice.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Anyone else? I
Your
just have
worship,
one quick, sorry, go ahead.
sorry, just two quick things. After your
Yep.
comments, you can just, before you jump from your comments to signing off the meeting really quick, can you refer back to me?
Okay, sure. I can, good, no problem. Yeah, my only comment was just two things, something we should all be heartened at. We have anyone who happens to be over the age of 85, bookings for COVID-19 vaccinations are starting now, and in fact are ongoing starting this week. And in fact, my mother-in-law is being vaccinated on Friday afternoon at our local pharmacy, which I think is wonderful. And also, this might be what Mr. Spear wants to talk about, but I know we had a whole delegation of public health and ministry and Horizon Health people come to town today to take a look at our wellness center and to take a look at our arena as a possible site for when we have more widespread vaccinations for general public happening. And hopefully we will be approved and we will have all of our people who need to get vaccinated will be able to get vaccinated in our town. So I think that's a terrific piece of good news. But wait your turn. Don't call the pharmacy if you're not 85 years old, and don't start calling town hall because you're anxious to get your vaccination. I know we all are, and I hope everybody will, but that will just tie up the phone lines. Just wait and be patient, and you'll get full information as soon as we know everything. So anyway, that's my comment. Mr. Spear.
May I ask a question?
Yes, you certainly can.
People with special health conditions, are they also allowed to get the immunization at this time?
Not at the pharmacies as far as I know right now, but you would have to check with the pharmacist to find out whether or not that's.
I was just wondering.
It's only an age thing at this point, I think.
Okay. Thank you.
Your worship, I will add that in very brief discussions, they said they will likely be addressing vulnerable sectors before, the general public. But
Right.
You're absolutely right. Right now, it's just 85 years old and over that are to go to the pharmacies, so they aren't overwhelmed.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Spear.
Sure. So the clerk asked me to ask you if you're ready to go back to in-person meetings for the April meeting in the ballroom at the arena.
Will there be cake?
Oh boy, I can hear the clapping. No. So I think that'll be the recommendation of staff, is to meet in person again.
Through you, your worship.
Yes.
Would we have to wear a mask for the duration of the meeting though? Being an inside public place?
I'll have to look, because I think if there's 2 meter distances, you don't, but I'll have to review that.
Okay, just if we have to wear a mask for.
Well, we'll bring it up before, we'll bring it.
Perfect. 3 hours is a long time to sit
We'll-
talking.
we'll-
with us.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Or maybe it will make you energized to get out of there in a quicker amount of time.
Plexi glass.
But anyway, we brought that forward. It's a good point. We'll double check on what the procedures would have to be. And council, I hate to do this to you, but we should go to closed session for about 10 minutes, if that's okay.
Oh, but
I
we
did let Councillor Harrison.
so we did let Counselor Harrison go, so we really can't. Can you call him back?
He's gone.
I texted him to come back, but he may not be able.
Maybe eating supper.
It's
Okay.
I move.
still
that we
have
go
a
to
forum
closed session.
without Councillor Harrison, so perhaps we can do that. So if we're not, are we we're off of Facebook, et cetera, right at the moment? Is
Not
that-
yet, not yet.
No, we are
Motion.
not yet, no.
I move to go to closed session.
Okay,
I'll
I'll
second
second.
that.
Deputy Mayor, can I have a seconder for that, please?
second.
Yeah, Councilor Groot, thank you. All in favor of going to closed session, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. We're in closed session. We still have quorum, so we can. go.
Wait a
I
minute.
don't think we're in closed session yet.
No, wait, I could see in the top left-hand corner when we're
Mr.
bouncing
Knopper is
off.
going a bit crazy on us there.
We're not in closed session yet.
You better learn sign language.
Okay. Just give me a second, folks.
Okay, I'm taking 2 minutes.
Be right back.
Okay. Okay, bye-bye. Council, he can't turn anything off, so everyone sign off and then sign back on in about 3 minutes.
Oh, so we all have to sign off.
You have to sign off. He's lost control of his computer. It's frozen.
The only challenge we have is that Counselor Akaji and Bishop, if they log back, they'll be kicked out of this meeting and be maybe a little confused by it too.
Yeah,
I'm right here.
Okay, well then just Counselor Bishop.
We'll wait till everybody's back and then we can do that and
So,
hope we can all get back in.
okay. Okay, I'll be right back.
Well, it's not gonna close the town if we can't hold this meeting, but we did
Do it.
bring it to someone's attention that we'd address something tonight.
The Bruins game just started, so as long as I catch the second period.
No
Not the
comment.
playoffs yet, so
I
it doesn't
was
really
waiting for-
matter.
I was waiting for a comment from Counselor Gumashell, but never happened.
Too late in the meeting.
Why doesn't everybody sign off and we can just call Counselor Bishop? She's gonna be gone for a minute, so by the time she gets back, we might be signed back in.
okay,
I'll call her on the phone,
so sign off.
let her know what
okay?
happened. Is that okay, your worship?
Yep.
Yeah, everyone just sign off and I'll call Counselor Bishop, know what happened.